let's just start with just first off, shout out to Kenneth Williams, because
oh man,
how important is that kick return for a touchdown now?
Quite literally is the difference.
The game.
In the game.
It's the game.
Yeah.
And that momentum coming out of the half was super needed, because that's what we didn't have last week. We weren't able to find a spark last week out of the half. And I tweeted mid-game going into halftime that I felt much better about this game going into half. And I feel like, rightfully so. I feel like a lot of the things that we invested in the first half offensively in the play calling, we were very close to a lot of, opportunities in the first half. And I know close doesn't matter if you don't get in the end zone, but a lot of things we invested in the first half were able to allow us to be successful in the second half. That's what I thought might happen. Mm-hmm. And we saw a lot of that pay off in the last drive, especially. I do want to give credit where it's due. Dylan, shout out to him for responding after the interception, coming down to the field and picking up some big third down plays, and being able to get it in the end zone to win there at the end of the game. But I liked the investment in the run game early on. I do understand some people think we just run the ball all the time when we started to pass and didn't have a ton of success. Everybody's like, run the ball with Emmett. We got to mix it up a little bit. And then that's kind of what started to pay off a little bit in the second half, and Nebraska started to pull away from the game. But I think the big part of it that I want to point out is Northwestern, I don't think, is in that game without the officiating. I'm sorry, and I'm not one to blame.
They gave them 2 scores, right?
I'm not one to blame the officials, but we got to call it what it is. Let's just start in the first half. First half, how did you feel about that?
It felt very actually similar to USC last year, in the sense where, like, you liked what you're seeing, you just weren't seeing a finished product or like the total end result. Like, between the 20s looked very good. Inside the 20s was rough. I personally didn't like the red zone offense. Again, seems to be an issue. Now, granted, I think it was the first possession, right, where they started with a RPO fade, and they ran it, and then they ran it again and scored a touchdown like 2 plays later. But I don't understand why they keep running these RPO fades in the red zone, unless it's to Isaiah Hunter, because apparently he's the only one that can catch them.
Well, what are you going to give Dane? What is Dane Key supposed to do? Have Inspector Gadget extendo arms and be able to go out and catch the ball 30 yards past him? So he's not. Dane Key's not even getting an opportunity to catch the ball when they're throwing fades to him. So what do you mean?
Yeah, that was a penalty in of itself.
Not when Dane Key gets a fade route towards the end zone, they're throwing 30 yards over his head.
Overall, the first half, I thought it looked good. You just kind of were hoping for more. They 2 red zone opportunities squandered, but it was like you felt a lot different than you did last week with the exact same score, minus it was flipped.
Yeah,
but it felt better. It looked better.
You were getting the ball out of his hands quickly. You're moving the pocket. You were running the ball up the middle. You were doing things to fuse Northwestern's defense, and that's what we wanted to see. We wanted to see them come out with some kind of a game plan to move those defenders around the field, make them cover grass, and try to be able to throw some, open up those windows for Dylan to be able to make some quick throws. We saw that early on. One thing I will say about the defense is we talked about how we wanted this defense to come and stack the box, play physical, and I think they did that, especially in the first half. Minus, a couple of big plays. There in the first half, the biggest play was that one deep pass down the left side of the field, which, that's a good throw and catch. You get beat. He got beat by a step on that, but overall, you did what you needed to do, because Northwestern doesn't have really an explosive offense. So what you did was you needed to just rally the football, keep everything in front of you, stop the run, and we did that. And it was a really good thing that we were able to do that. Up in the first half, especially, they had that big run there in the second half, but that's what happens when everybody kind of gets sucked in, and then the ball goes to the outside, and nobody is there on their contain. So somebody lost their responsibility there. So that goes into some of the execution things, which we will get into, because I'm going to sit here and I'm going to say the offensive play call in the first half, I really liked the play calling. The execution was lacking in a lot of areas. And so 2 things can be true. In the first half, a lot of people were melting down because the scoreboard was what it was. We had 7 points on the board. But again, I think that is an offensive game plan that we can build from. And that's kind of what I wanted to see. Are you in agreement with that?
Yeah, I 100% agree. I was just reading through some notes too. I was keeping tallies and I forgot to keep track towards the end of the game, but it was like we were talking about yesterday stacking the box. And so I like made like a barometer of like what I considered stacking the box. And I basically considered 5 or more was kind of stacking the box. And Nebraska had 5 or more in the first half on probably 65% of obvious rushing downs. And then the other thing we talked about yesterday too was their quarterback's not a great thrower to the boundaries. Yeah. And if they beat you doing that,
so be it.
Kudos to them. And I will give their quarterback credit. He did hit a couple tough throws to the boundary. In fact, almost all of his throws today completed were to the boundary.
Some incredible
because the middle of the field was completely covered. That was Nebraska's focal point. Cover the middle. Don't let them get anything in the middle.
And some incredible catches too, which tends to happen against us. You know, some guys make some incredible throws and catches against us when they normally wouldn't, especially there on that last drive.
That back shoulder
throw. Come on, man. And the way he just got his hands out there and was able to extend and make that catch, it just seems like that happens against us a lot. However, I do want to say, in the face of adversity, credit to this team for responding and coming out and winning the game, because it's much easier to point at the officiating in a win versus a loss.
Yeah.
Because I talked about that, you know, with Alibaba, the Minnesota guy we talked to the week prior, because he was talking about the officiating against Purdue. You know, when you come out of a win, you're talking about it. It's to me, there's something to be said about it. But I feel like I have to bring it up just because the middle of this game, I don't think, I think Nebraska wins this game by multiple scores, if not for these calls. And I think the biggest thing is when I posted about the officiating right before the Raiola interception, and then everybody's confirmation bias was, well, Raiola just threw an interception. Well, that again is void of all nuance. It's a void of all nuance of the officiating is still a problem. You know, we can agree that was a terrible throw, but at the same time, we're not in that situation potentially without that. And so we can still say Raiola that was a terrible throw, terrible read, which we know he makes those a lot of boneheaded throws, a lot of boneheaded reads sometimes. But you know, it's true to agree. Every team mistakes, misassignments, turnovers. But it was the timing of these calls. You know, it's not just about whether like a call's right or wrong in isolation. It's when it happens, and what it does to the momentum and the situation of the game. So, a flag on a third down stop late in the fourth quarter can completely swing the game's outcome, as we know, even if both teams make mistakes earlier. Timing kind of is everything on this. So you can acknowledge that your team did not play perfectly. Maybe there were, turnover or some red zone issues, and still recognize the officiating decisions, like at key moments, directly altered the game script. There's situations where we may not have been throwing that pass there had those calls not led to a pass in that situation.